Hi there, I'm Greg Holmes from FlexNet Software. Today I'm going to give you a demo on our enterprise license optimization products, FlexNet Manager Platform. First I'm going to give you an overview and then we'll move on to the demonstration later. To begin with, I'd like to discuss some of the software license management challenges that FlexNet Manager Platform is here to help you with. At any time, an organization will have thousands of licenses, and some of these licenses may be over-licensed, some will be out of compliance, and some may be optimal. What we try to do is help organizations get as many licenses into the optimal area as possible so that they're not spending too much on licenses and maintenance fees, but at the same time, they're not in any risk of compliance issues with their vendors. So to avoid this overspending issue, we need to ensure that we can accurately track the software that's installed on all of the computers in the enterprise's environment, and also at the same time understand the rights of entitlement that the organization has purchased from the software vendors. And this balancing is what we call software reconciliation. And a good software reconciliation will take into account all of the rights of use that you can buy when you buy software. So to ensure that, we need to understand the difference between a shrink-wrapped copy of software and one that might be bought under a general agreement with extra rights of use. So to avoid overspending, first of all, on software licenses and maintenance, what we need to know is what we have, what is installed in the environment. And once we know that, we can ensure that we only buy what we need, and what we pay maintenance on is a factor of that. So if we can avoid paying maintenance for software that isn't used, that's going to be a real saving for any business in the industry. So FlexNet Manager Suite will help generate hardware and software asset reporting based on inventory either collected through our technology or through other vendors' technologies that you might have agents already deployed. It will help you provide an accurate license position by representing the exact rights of use that you've bought from vendors, and helping with upgrades and downgrades of software throughout the environment. So finally, to help you reduce license and maintenance costs, we'll actually connect the usage of the software that we're paying for maintenance on with the actual maintenance contracts. And by tracking that, you'll be able to see the proportion of those maintenance contracts that's getting value in the environment. So to ensure that software audits and license compliance is taken care of, what we want to do is make sure that any inventory that we provide for systems is going to be as accurate or more accurate than what the vendor itself would find if they came into your environment. So this will help organizations avoid unbudgeted audit costs and true-up expenses that might, reach much more value than the initial purchase cost of those products. So in the FlexNet Manager Suite, we can generate vendor audit reports ad hoc. So whenever you need to know the exact situation in your software environment, you can get a report for any of your vendors. We can also dramatically reduce audit preparation time and cost. In many cases, we found months, if not years, of man hours are saved by actually performing a quick audit using the product and having ad hoc information that's real time. It's from the most recent inventories from the machines and compared to the most recent purchases of software. And we can bring that information into those reports so it's visible at any time. And finally, we can provide an accurate assessment of your licenses position independent of the vendor. So without needing to notify a vendor that you're checking your situation with their software, you'll be able to come up with an accurate license assessment on your own independently. And in a customer example, they were being audited by Adobe, and they were using our FlexNet Manager for Adobe product. And this allowed them to eliminate 9,300 seats of license liability. That saving made sure that that manager was able to demonstrate to the Adobe staff that they were well and truly covered. So I just mentioned that we can especially do licensing for particular vendors, such as Adobe. The point of the platform for FlexNet Manager is to ensure that we can do this for all vendors. So the platform product itself has extensive cross-customer, cross-vendor capabilities to recognize software from any vendor and to allow you to manage contracts from any vendor. and represent your license positions accordingly. Because of the scale and the amount of information coming from those vendors, you need to accelerate your ability to recognize their software, both on your machines and the entitlements as you purchase them, and represent those licenses against those purchases. So for Adobe, IBM, Microsoft, Symantec, we provide optimization products which allow you to accurately represent the spend that you have against those vendors. And additionally, for SAP Business Suite and many thousands of engineering applications, we can go a step further and automate the actual allocation and usage analysis of those licenses and ensure that you're not using licenses above the level that you have. And to actually manage the process of finding savings, requesting software, and managing that software licensing, we have the Workflow Manager product, which helps accelerate and manage the workflow that you use to manage your licensing. Finally, I wanted to explain a little bit about how we process information in the product before we actually jump into the demonstration and get to the actual look and feel of those reports that you'll find really powerful at analyzing your data. So first of all, we'll take several data feeds. And these data feeds are to ensure that we're accurately representing both the installations of products and understanding the purchasing and contracts that you have of any licensed product in your environment. So to bring that data in, we first would collect data from a hardware or software inventory. And using our inventory agents, we can collect that data from Windows, Unix, Linux, Mac, virtual machines, and many other systems as well. Additionally, we need to bring in purchasing data and contract data. And these sources of data help you understand the entitlements of software that you've bought. This could come from any system that you have in your environment. You could be collecting this on spreadsheets, you could be managing it inside SAP or Oracle, or many other systems. The point is, we need to collect the data from the source so we can accurately represent what you've bought from a vendor. Also, the help desk or service catalog might have some useful information representing the relationships between machines in your environment, or perhaps to who those machines belong, and accordingly help you map the expenditure on that software to that part of the organization. And speaking of the organizations, it's good to have the clean, most up-to-date user and org data in the system as well, and that will help you drive the information that you want for reporting. So the point of getting the data in is so that we can optimize and manage the licenses. And so in the middle of this screen, you will see an optimization engine. This engine will take the information about the entitlement that we've taken and process that through a recognition library. This recognition library can analyze the different purchasing codes or products or SKUs that you've used to buy products. It understands the relationships that you have with vendors and the kinds of purchasing rights that vendors give you in the purchase use rights library. And then finally, we need to understand what software is installed on which machines. To understand that, we use the application recognition library, which processes the inventory feeds and understands exactly what software is installed on which machines and the users that use that software and how much it's getting used. Finally, that information gets fed out into the reports and alerts that asset managers use to create their reporting on asset usage, on license compliance, contract management, and any savings that they've found using the technology. With that, let's move on to a live demonstration of the product so that you can understand exactly the different kinds of reports and the consoles and tools that you can use to analyze the information. So, over to the product now, and what we're looking at to begin with is the FlexNet Manager Platform reporting portal. So first of all, I've pulled up the compliance overview report, and this is interesting to almost anyone involved in the asset management. So first of all, it highlights any alerts in the organization. So alerting to problems with potential payments on licenses or hardware assets. It also shows any licenses in breach and also indicates any contracts that are due for renewal soon so that you can start planning for those contract renewals. It highlights on the top right-hand corner a planned payments graphic showing in the next few months what we're spending all of our software budget on. And as you can see here, there's some obligations, some additional projected payments, and it could also show some paid payments in advance if that existed in this organization. One of the points of differentiating between the obligated payments and the additional projected payments is that the projected ones might be able to be altered depending on circumstances. So if we happen to see a situation where there's an opportunity to save money, it's going to be easier on the projected payments than the obligated payments. The breach report in the bottom left of the screen right now shows any licenses where we're concerned about the level of licensing that we've currently engaged in. And now this could be purely on a numbers for volume licenses. For instance, here we've got a situation where we are using far too many SAP employee-based licenses than we purchased. Or it could be a situation that the license rules don't allow us to use the licenses in the way we are using them now. And that could be, for example, with Oracle, that where we have servers commissioned as named user plus licenses, but they can't manage to run as few users as we have allocated to those licenses on the class of machine that they're running. The payments due highlights all of the payments in a big pie chart to understand what kind of payments we have and what kinds of savings we've made in the past on those payments. And there's an additional chart down the bottom on payment optimization. Now this is a very interesting one because using the payment optimization, we can understand the level of payments that we have going out to the vendors and be able to compare at the same time the actual utilized value. Now, utilized value is a comparison of the installed software versus the purchased software, and also comparing the actual used software against those totals as well. So if, for example, we have 100 licenses and we're paying a 10,000 maintenance payment on those licenses, but we're only installing 50, then we're already wasting money because there's 50 unutilized licenses in that we're paying for, approximately $5,000 against and getting no use at all. But also, if we have installed software that doesn't get used, we could be wasting even more money. And so we can detect the usage levels of the software and compare that against the installed usage of the software, and then come to an understanding of what the approximate utilized value of that software is. And by analyzing this, procurement officers could understand how much value they're getting out of a contract when it becomes time to renew that contract or make a payment against it. And that's going to be very useful having savings through this system. So to understand better where those optimization examples exist, we can drill down using these charts to get to the actual licenses in detail. So let me click here, and I'll move to the license report straight away so that we understand where we are in terms of licensing. So the license that we're going to look at today, just as an example license at this point, is the Visio license from Microsoft. And this Visio license was bought in 2003. But using our usage rights, we understand that we have the right of upgrade on this license. And so the license details actually say now that we're able to use Visio 2010 Professional on this license agreement. And we have a purchase quantity of 400, so we have quite a few of these licenses. And we have an understanding of what the initial purchase price is, and also how much we pay in software assurance to this vendor. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see all of the license rules that we've detected against this license. And this is part of the value of the product. So these license rules allow you to understand A, what you've bought when you've bought the software, B, which rights allow you to upgrade and downgrade the software, and what additional rights other than that you might have achieved, such as secondary usage right or use on virtual systems. And C, we update this library regularly, so you stay in touch with what you have. So you don't need to manually change these rights and rules as you go. The system will be able to do it for you on a monthly basis. So in the payment section, we actually compare and link any future payment on the software with the actual usage and consumption of those licenses. And here you can see the payments that we've made against the Visio license, or that we are making indeed in the next few years. And we understand which payments are obligations versus additional payments that we may be able to manage, and also understand what we've paid in the past, what we estimated and budgeted that we would pay, and what do we have plans on paying in the future. And we can manage all of that inside the system. Further down on that report, we can analyze the purchases, the consumed quantity, and understand the usage that we have on that software. So first of all, what is usage? Well, when you buy a license and you install it, according to the vendor, you usually consume the license at that point. So we mark consumed licenses in green to highlight that you're using those licenses. But additionally, we can track usage, and that is how much does a user use a piece of software. And according to whatever you'd like to make as a definition of usage in your organization, you could say that if they use it 3 times a month, that's enough usage to say it's used. And that means you'll track that information, and we can analyze that against the installed copies of the software to understand which ones of those installed pieces of software are actually getting used by the user. This allows you later to take advantage of this and re-harvest licenses from computers that don't actually use it. And what we can show in a chart here is the actual history of that usage over time, and the history of any purchases and installations of the software as well. So you can see in the chart that we begin in 2007, and in 2007 we bought some copies of the software, bringing us from 0 up to 400 copies of the software. And at that time we started to install the software in our environment, and you can see the green line going up, and quite recently in this chart the graph really jumps up. So we started rolling out this software to almost everyone who needed it. And also you can see that the usage tracks this. So as time passes, the usage levels go up and everyone starts using this software. So in this case, you can see, although we're only at 65% used right now, or 84% is consumed and 65% of that is used. But you would say that it's hard to get any understanding that people are going to stop using this software. So at this point, everything's normal, and we can quite happily keep using that software on these machines. And it would be unwise probably to reduce our quantity that we're supporting, because at this point our consumption is going up. So it might be a case where we need to prepare to buy further licenses in the future. But in other cases, you'll see that the usage might decline, and in those cases you can take advantage of the situation and talk to your vendor about how many copies you want to keep maintenance on, or if you're buying upgrades, do you need to upgrade every single license that you bought last time? So those charts are very interesting. Further down, we can also track who in the company is using the software, the contracts that we've bought the software on, and right down at the bottom, and I find this very interesting, track the license assignments to groups in the organization. Now, what does license assignments to groups really mean? Well, in this case, we're tracking the purchasing part of the organization. So which part of the organization brought these licenses in, an assignment of those licenses, so transferring those licenses within the organization, where allowed by the licensing conditions, to allow different parts of the organization manage and consume their licenses and track that internally. And this gives you the concept of internal compliance for your software. So where one part of your organization is allocated a set of licenses, if they use more than that set of licenses, then they are not in compliance, even though as a whole your organization may still be in compliant. This is useful to report and plan the cost of those licenses throughout the organization. And in some cases, organizations will use our technology to create chargeback reports to show who is actually using the software and who should be spending their money on a monthly basis to support that software. So to manage a set of licenses using the product, we can come up with views and reports which will show all sorts of things about the usage. So right now, as a license manager, I've logged into the system and I can see this report which is showing all of my licenses that I've ever bought in the organization and their consumption and purchasing information. And here in the compliance status, I can see which ones are in breach or which ones are compliant. In fact, if I go to the breaches report, it will show me just the ones in breach and how much in breach they are. So I understand that the quantity purchased is greater than, well, the quantity consumed rather is greater than the quantity purchased. for all of these different licenses in this example system. I must warn you, this is only sample data. This is not the status of FlexEra Software's licensing. So on these reports, we can then drive filters through to ensure that we're only looking at information that's pertinent to our current situation. So again, if we wanted to go back to our Microsoft situation, I can put the vendor name in here and ask for the filter, and it will show me just the Microsoft licenses that are in breach. So this is Project 2003 Professional and Windows Server, which is interestingly enough some of the data that we've got in the system. I can drill down on these reports and it will show me a lot of detail about who has that software installed and which part of the company they are in and how many licenses that are being consumed by those installs. So let's move into some areas of more specialized licensing. First of all, let's look at Oracle. Oracle is one of those license types that it's very important for users to understand that it's easy to install Oracle, and it's very easy to install all of the components that you can buy from Oracle for a database or a similar installation of their software. And it's once you've got the software out there that it could be a case that people start using different components that may not be entitled to in the licensing. So for that reason, Oracle are very keen at having their customers fill out a server worksheet to ensure that all of their licensing information is shown in their current environment. And we can help make that happen really quickly. So the Oracle Server Worksheet is one of those reports that Oracle actually asks their customers to fill out for them. And this is to report on the kinds of licenses that you're using from Oracle, and it's basically a complete inventory of all of the Oracle systems in your environment. We can provide this report on an instant basis based on all the information we're collecting from the systems. And so this can include the server name, the instance name, the database version, the database edition, and all of the other important licensing facts about your systems, such as whether they're a production system or a standby system, or if they're a mirror, if there's options or management packs installed, how many users log into that server, how many CPUs the server has, and all of those pertinent details. Additionally, we can provide other reports such as where all the Oracle components are installed. And this report highlights in great detail all of the instances and all of the important Oracle components that are installed and whether they're used. And it's that usage in most of these cases that actually triggers the licensing decision. So to have a lot of unmanaged installed products out there that once they are used cost you money is something that many organizations want to control, so that they don't become quickly uncompliant or incur unneeded or unnecessary licensing cost. So before I finish Oracle, just to look at the picture that we can show, we can align all of the installations of Oracle up to licenses so that we understand that all of them are managed. We can highlight where the licenses are compliant so that we have sufficient licenses in our organization, and where they're in breach, where we have problems with our Oracle licensing. And we can drill into that report and it will show us a greater level of detail on that. And where the breach occurs, it will tell us why we're in breach. So for particular systems, we have some AIX system and a HBUX system where we've got Oracle user licensing in force, but for whatever reason, we don't meet the user minimums. And so that would mean that we need to buy more licenses because we didn't plan for the actual scale of the systems and not just the number of users connecting to those systems. One thing about our Oracle license management solution is that Oracle themselves actually accept the inventory we collect as being correct. And so this is part of the Oracle LMS drive to understand customer environments and ensure that customers themselves can bring themselves into compliance. SAP is another very large software vendor who have very many important software licenses. And so for any SAP customer, the challenge at licensing is not just around finding all the SAP machines, because usually these are very simple to find. There might be 5, there might be 100, but they're very well-known systems in any organization using SAP. So the big challenge in SAP is the named user types that they're using within SAP and any engine licenses they may also be using. What FlexEra software can do with SAP is within SAP itself, we can track, assign, and manage the user types according to the contract that the customer has with SAP. And so the SAP administrator can easily read through their contract, understand the rights, and then model those rights against their user environment and track against real usage of the software. FlexEra software will help those administrators understand what the best license type for each user could be and then reassign those rights in the system. And what we show here in the platform is the highlights of that particular integration there. So here we understand the My User or My SAP employee licenses, My SAP professional licenses, and the differences in the level of usage. And we have several charts here to help analyze and understand what the business problem is and project any payment savings that the organization can make against that SAP contracts. Again, a very important area of licensing. And then also we can help in the particularly difficult area of concurrently licensed engineering applications. And these applications are usually highly technical applications. They're used by organizations that really value their use, but they can be incredibly expensive per seat. And what we can do in those particular licenses is analyze their usage down to the minute or the hour and understand all the different users and the features that they are checking in and checking out of those license servers on a real-time basis. And what we bring in to the platform from that information is an understanding of what the maximum level of licenses used over any period of time is and where the organization has chance to save money, to identify that in these reports. And of course, there is a possibility for organizations to be in breach in this area as well, even though most of the time their licenses are locked down by the concurrent usage. There could still be an occasion for breach depending on how the vendor grants the use of the licenses. And so if that happens, we can also highlight any breaches here in this report. So in this case, we've got an application called Geolog, which has one license, but somehow 5 managed to be consumed, and the usage reflects that as well, that there was more than that number purchased being used at any one time. And that's something that we can overcome and work with that vendor at trying to restore a better licensing position. And so here you can see the same kinds of information as we drill down to the Geolog report and understand the licensing usage. So finally, we've looked at quite a few different things. So we've looked at licenses, we've looked at payments being made on those licenses, and also we have a set of reports here that allows you to manage all sorts of details about your environment. So when we're bringing data into the system, we're bringing in information about applications that are installed and used, a count of different assets, and in fact there's a lot of asset information. Many of our customers use our asset management to manage their warranty, to manage asset replacement, the duplicate assets, ensure that they're managing all of those assets according to their full life cycle management. So as assets come into the organization, they're registered, and as they go out, we retire them in the system, and their software is returned to the license pool. Additionally, we've got information about the contracts, all of the payments being made on the contracts, licensing, and various other areas, including virtual machines. If I go into one of these reports in particular, I've got a license publisher summary, and this is that good old report you'd like to pull out anytime that a vendor comes to talk to you about their licensing position with you. And here, what it's important is we can pull out the information from a particular vendor and understand all of the software licenses that you own with that vendor. And also, if there's any software that you have that is not licensed from that vendor, it highlights that as well so that you can understand that you are completely licensed or you are not. So the Microsoft report will come up in just 1 second now, and it will actually show all of the different products that we've got licensed from that vendor, as you can see in the report. Most of these are very nicely compliant. However, there's those two that we talked about before, Project and Windows Server, where we have a licensing issue, and we can drill in those to understand in more detail what's wrong with them. Also, we can see any applications that are not licensed, and many of these don't need to be licensed, but we can highlight the ones that do. For now, let's drill into that report on project and understand what our problem in that particular product is. And so here again we get a summary report. This is on a particular license. It's got a chart showing the breakdown of computers that have this installed, and also shows us all of the licensing terms and conditions we're entitled to on that product. So in this case, you understand that we don't have secondary usage rights and we don't have multiple usage rights from the contract. And so maybe there's a problem with the rights that we're using. You can see also here's the contract that we've bought that license under. We have a purchasing history, so we need to make sure that all of the purchases are represented. And we have a chart on this page and the next and so forth that shows all of the installs. And we could analyze that to make sure that that's fine as well. And if at any time you wanted to take this report and give it to someone else, we can quickly make a PDF from that report straight away from the system, or we could use some other way of representing the data. You might take it as a web page, or you might just want the grid of results, and we can do that as well. And there's the PDF of that document. So with over 100 built-in reports, it's not surprising that there's still many other things that you may want to track when you're understanding your licensing or any of your assets that you're managing using the licensing system. And so what we offer is a custom view system which allows you to build your own views and understand the linkages between all of the different objects in the system, such as contracts and purchase orders, or the purchase orders themselves and the users who might be using software at the end. And you can link a chain of these objects together and bring up a report or a view purely from a very easy to understand end user console. And I'll get to that just in a second. So now let's go over to the end user console and see how a license administrator would work on a daily basis on any of their problems in license management. So first of all, within the system, we're looking at the software assets section. And what we can see here is a set of alerts that will let us know if there's any problems with any of the particular licenses that we have in the system. So if I drill down onto the breach report, it will take us straight into any of those licenses where there's a problem or issue with the licensing. Also, what we can do here, we can group any of the licenses together. So if I'm only concerned with one type of license, I can look at that here. I can also filter the results, and here I might be only concerned with a particular vendor. So let me just choose Microsoft, for instance, and then I can see the two Microsoft licenses that I have an issue with right now. Additionally, in the general licensing area, you'll see that we have a whole host of different license types under management. And these types are the different usage capabilities we can track using the system. And we can actually model the different license agreements that you might have with vendors in many ways. And so there's things here that will manage core points licensing, for instance, which is an allocation of a number of points to a specific kind of CPU core, and that then multiplies through all of the installs, and we can track all of those separately. Or a processor limited license, which is actually a license that's to track a particular class of machine able to use a piece of software. So for instance, you might have SQL Server licensed for up to 2 CPUs or a 4 CPU version of it, and each of those licenses would track a particular entitlement. Additionally, we've got Oracle licensing, we've got SAP licensing in the system, and these license types manage particular kinds of licenses from particular vendors. If I go back to my example that I showed earlier on Visio, I can open up the license here, and I can show you some of the additional purchasing rights we're monitoring in the system. So first of all, if we look in this, you can understand on upgrades and downgrades some of the purchase usage rights we've acquired when we've bought this product from a vendor. So first of all, this support downgrades from primary application and support upgrades from primary application. So basically our vendor's given us the capability of using not only the version that we bought, but the newer versions that came out after it, and also older versions that came out before we bought the software license. And this could be in an enterprise situation where we've already rolled out an older version of the software to many other computers, but we want to extend the use. So this example allows you to do that. Under special use, we're tracking additional rights of second use. Now, these additional rights might let you use the software on an additional laptop, or they might let you cover the usage of licenses on virtual machines. And this allows you to take one license and use it in a multiple number of installations. With a traditional way of measuring those software installations, you might come up with a very high figure for the actual installations and licensing for the software. Now let me show you the effect on this license of that kind of recognition. So here, under installed, here are my list of computers with installations, and it counts up 380 different computers which have a copy of this software on them. Under consumed, we're able to represent the multiple usage rights. And so here is a situation where I've got several users anyway, with 2 computers per user. And that situation means that we're actually not consuming an additional license for the further installation of that software. So this means we have a consumption count of 309 against an install count of 380. In one moment, we've recognized that there's 71 licenses we didn't need to buy for this software that we would have bought if we didn't have a good understanding of the consumption. Additionally, we're tracking the usage here, and so under usage, we're able to see that only 260 of these installed copies actively get used by the user, which means there's an additional 50 licenses that may not need to be deployed as well. So with all of this understanding, we can then use filters and make reports that will basically show a list of computers that don't need the software. So if I go and look for computers which don't use the software, say OK, I can find 54 installations or 49 consumed licenses that wouldn't need to be consumed if we didn't have the software there. And that could free up the software for further use elsewhere in the organization. So how do we get to that position where we're able to recognize a particular license as Visio with those purchase usage rights and automatically understand what software we're allowed to install on our machines and count against those particular licenses? So to get to the root of that problem, we first need to analyze some of the purchasing information from the organization when it's brought those licenses in. Now, this kind of purchasing information could be directly from the systems of the customer, so the organization who's bought 100 Visio licenses may have purchase orders, one big purchase order that shows 100, or 99 little purchase orders showing 1 or 2 licenses each. So these purchase orders come into the system through imports, so we can automatically bring this information from a source of data, such as SAP, or we could bring it in using a spreadsheet, or it could be manually typed into the system, although I'm sure you don't want to do that with thousands of licenses. And so we get then an understanding of the licenses that have been bought and the quantities against them. If we look at one of these columns of data, it's called the part number, or SKU. Now this SKU code is like a recognition of the vendor of what you're trying to buy when you buy software from them. So you give the vendor a SKU code and they'll give you a certain number of pieces of paper that say that you have the right to use that software. And most of this happens electronically these days. If I click on this button here, it shows me what we understand that SKU to be. So this 8-digit number here actually tells us that this is a particular version of Microsoft Access bought under a select agreement with particular rights of use. Very good. But still, to get from this to a license that's tracking that, it still requires a fair bit of work here. So what we've done instead, we've created a wizard that will help you understand what the right of use you're trying to track is. And so here, it's done a recognition across all of the purchase orders I've got in my system that haven't been allocated to a license. So I can scroll down through this list and I can see all of the different purchase orders that are ready to be recognized. Or I could do a little filter to try and look for a particular line of software that I want to recognize. And as the Adobe license administrator today, I'd like to make sure that all of the software that's out in the environment is correctly matched against the licenses that we've bought for Adobe. And so first of all, I can check the SKU code that we've bought this against. And so this is Adobe Illustrator CS3. And as you can see, it came from Adobe. It's got a certain number of points from a certain kind of purchasing program. And we can actually use all of that data to represent against a contract and against the vendor what we've bought from this situation. And to create a license tracking object and actually link that to the software we're trying to find in the organization, we've got basically a single click option, which lets me click on this accept button for this purchase order. It creates a record and tracks the software against it. Now let me go in and have a look. Here's the Adobe Illustrator license that we're tracking. It's got 10 purchases from the PO, which we just integrated then. And under upgrades and downgrades, it's able to track, and it knows and understands that this license itself supports downgrades of this application as well. So without having bought any additional licenses, we're actually able to use these licenses to license computers using older versions of Illustrator as well. And in fact, under applications, you can see the full list of the different versions of Illustrator we're supporting here. Okay, so we have a license, we have an entitlement, and we're actually able to link the two automatically. And this is a process that without having that recognition would take quite a lot of time to read the contracts and understand what you've bought and understand what you need to track to understand if you're in compliance with that license. And so from quickly recognizing the SKU codes and understanding the purchasing that you've made previously with those products, we can then come to this list of licenses and understand what's being used in your environment. And one prime example of this and the difficulty of doing all of this matching is the Creative Suite product. So just here I've got Adobe Creative Suite 4, which I instantiated from another one of those SKU objects. Now here it's got a link to a Creative Suite CS4 design standard and allows me to use that product. If I go to the applications, that's all I'm allowed to use. But this is a very special product. So let me open that up. And inside that I'm going to have a look at this license. So this is a bit of our recognition library in fact. And for Creative Suite 4, I actually have some installers that will recognize what this product is, just from what's installed on a computer. But more importantly, we understand the installers. These installers show us that something has been installed on the machine to mark it as an install of Creative Suite 4. However, importantly, Creative Suite is one of those products that's actually made up of other products. And so we call this a suite inside our system. And so for suites, we have specialized recognition that actually uses the evidence of those other applications to prove that there's a copy of that piece of software which builds up to make the suite. And you only need to use those licenses once. So you don't need to buy, in this case, a license for Acrobat 9 and Creative Suite. You get one license that uses the whole bundle of products contained in that suite. And so we can assist with the recognition. We can understand how much of the suite you want to be present before you count it as the suite. And we can represent the suite as a whole and instead of all of the constituent parts as well. So finally, what have we learned today? We've had a look at the system to understand that we can manage the different sources of data to bring in and optimize information around license usage and the maintenance expenditure. And to ensure that we reduce the expenditure, we can ensure that any licenses that are not adequately used can be reharvested or recycled to defer additional purchases. And finally, we've looked at increasing the operational efficiency. So using things like workflow, contract management, purchasing information processing, and license tracking to ensure that we have a very slick system that adequately measures what licenses are being used and consumed and what's actually in the production environment. So that concludes today's presentation. Thanks for being very attentive. Click on the button at the bottom of the player. It's called Ask a Question. Your questions will come to FlexNet Software and we'll be very responsive to any questions that you might have, particularly on software asset management, SAP, Oracle, or any other area of license optimization. Thank you.